believed in and what empiricists believed in. How rationalists believe that uh, knowledge can be gained only through concepts in mind. So that became our thesis. Empiricists said that the ultimate source of knowledge is senses and not mind. That is experiential knowledge. So that became our antithesis. Like Locke and Hume, they negated rationalists. So we talked about negation and how it was antithesis, negating thesis. And then finally, we talked about the transcendental faculty of cognition, which became our synthesis, which Kant sort of tried to encapsulate. He tried to encapsulate both empiricism and rationalism. And here in Hegel, we see how the philosophy, how he believed that the philosophy of knowledge is historical and it happens through negation. So basically, the knowledge of self is an end product of a historical period, is what you had said.
Historical
Um,
process.
Process, right? Historical process. Then we talked about how Hegel was one of the most important philosophers of historicism. And historicism, it is anything. It believes that anything can be understood only in its historical context, only in its historical context, not otherwise. And we talked about how self knowledge is also historical, how historicism sees history as an end goal, as telos or ultimate purpose. And that also has its own laws, which we discussed later on. So basically, philosophy of knowledge, you said that in that negation is very important, because what the ideas that have been put forth or propagated earlier are negated, and therefore the progress of knowledge happens. And later on we also termed as used linearity as the word to describe this, how it's a linear process, how negation is a process of contradiction. Then um, then we talked about dialectic and how dialectic is a process through which thesis is negated. And negation negated is synthesis. So the three things that we discussed before, rationalist, empiricist, and transcendental faculty, it sort of fits there: thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. Then we talked about the three different types of laws, not types of laws, but the three laws which are the same basically: laws of history, laws of self consciousness, and laws of logic. All three are the same. And then we started discussing law of self consciousness, how knowledge of self, the first point was how knowledge of self is immediate and simple. And like you gave example, like how person, if the person is born, that is simple knowledge, like uh, and I'm just using what you added onto this later on here only. How A is A, that is simple knowledge. Based on sensory data probably, and the knowledge of self is the second, as not the other. The second point was knowledge of self as not the other, which means that your essence is in negation of others. To know what you're not, that is A is not equal to not A. It became that. And the third was you as absolute, that is mediated unity, which talks about the higher unity. So the example that was told again and again was how a person who is a Tamilian knows about is aware of his being a Tamilian, when he's sort of in vicinity of a person who is not a Tamilian, maybe who probably is a Gujarati. So that's when he knows that, okay, I am not a Gujarati, I am this. So it's sort of a dependent knowledge. And on a broader level, the absolute mediated unity, both are Indian, which is capital A is equal to capital A. And knowledge of self is dependent on the knowledge of other. That was the second point. That is mainly what we discussed, the 3 points. Then we talked about how human consciousness depends on the other. But we talked about the third, no, wait. Then we talked about logic, the third part. Aristotle's law of logic we discussed, which we had studied in the previous semester. How the 3 laws we discussed: laws of identity, how A is A. The second was law of non-contradiction. That is, A is not B. Like A cannot be not A. Law of non-contradiction. And the third was law of excluded middle, which is either that thing is A or not A. So Hegel, these was the 3 basic laws of logic that Aristotle had postulated, and Hegel sort of critiques these laws. He sort of comes up with something else which says that A can be equal to not A, which is it is possible for it to be not A as well. So the example was put forth was something on the lines of how, for instance, my father is my father, but at the same time he is the son of his father, or he's the husband of his wife. So that sort of talks about how one thing can be a lot of other things as well. So it sort of questions the law of A is equal to not A. So please stop me if I'm wrong, because that it was a bit of a confusion to me too. And then we talked about how human consciousness depends on the other, but does not want the other to be the other. It wants to turn the other into the same. That's where we talked about desire, and how I mean it can be seen in so many different things. How we want other things to be ours. And then we talked about I mean, this was we were still talking about Hegelian syllogism only. We just postulated in a mathematical form how small a is equal to small a is the first point. The second is small a is not equal to not a. And the third is capital A is equal to capital A. And then we talked about how history is analogous to these points of syllogism. How small a and a can be said pre-feudal, and the second one can be called feudalism, is analogous to feudalism, and the third is capitalism, or rise of, I mean, increasing private property and all that. Now, sir, I mean, this was basically what we had talked about.
Very
Yes, but I had one doubt of sorts. I think so. I did not attend the lecture last time, so this is what I had. I mean, I had. This is what I got from the recording. So my the Digvijay had in some previous class had asked you about temporal. Why? How is it temporal? What is temporal? This absolute, like the absolute is determined historically, which is the self-realization of the consciousness, and this is known as the temporal process of knowing, right? And then we talked about how in the absolute part, how capital A is capital A, and how it is sort of analogous to capitalism and private property and all of that. My question was this I mean, is it temporal in the sense that at that point of time, Hegel thought that that is absolute, notwithstanding the fact that later on that is also going to change because it's all historical and it's all temporal, I guess.
Yeah,
I mean,
good
this
question.
was,
And
yeah,
this is something that Jaldi had also asked, that is this
exactly. Yeah.
process unending or it ends with Hegel, right? And there is some ambiguity, and on he seems to indicate both the things, and that seems to be a problem, right? It's not clear. Uh, but he does use terms like end of history to say this, that the ultimate form of democracy. Can you see the screen that is shared?
So,
Can you?
I can only see the four different documents. Nothing is opened.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. Just one does it. Wait a minute. Now, what can you see?
Yes,
What?
sir. Now the document is visible.
Oh, okay. So last time it was not very accurate. Means he is not very clear about whether dialectic ends with his historical phase, right? But in terms of history, he does say that the rise of capitalism is the ultimate form of governance, right? And he actually pre-feudal is not very accurate way of putting it. I made it was not entirely accurate. What he says is that the earliest phase of history when there was no, in some way, everybody or nobody was free, right? In the sense that people were nomadic, wandering, and slowly you found that one person became supreme monarch or sovereign or even emperor, as in Greek and in Roman period, while others were not free. The third is when everybody is free in the time of capitalist democracy. That is his view of history. What is important here for us to keep in mind is dialectic or temporality, which you are asking about reason, is equated with freedom. And for that, you have to go, you may look back to Kant, who says that we are free from the shackles of traditional authorities by use of reason. And for Kant, it's the sign of maturity. If you do, does anyone remember this discussion?
Yes,
What
sir.
is enlightenment? Yeah.
Yes,
So
sir.
he says reason as being unshackled, right, is the sign of enlightenment. That's what he said. Uh, and once you insert temporality or time or movement into the whole process of getting knowledge, like Hegel does, then at each phase, reason would be bound by the historical context, right? It would be freer than the past, but less free than the future, right? That's how he sees freedom. It's a kind of gradual movement. And in historical terms, for him, the earliest phase when no one was free, then one person became free. Say, for example, Julius Caesar or Octavius Caesar uh, or Alexander the Great. And then you had sovereignty and monarchy, where one person was free. But with coming of capitalism, capitalist democracy or bourgeois democracy, everybody in theory is considered free, right? So rationality and freedom for him are equal. This is something very important that we have to bear in mind. So at every moment, we are free, more free compared to our historical past, but we are less free compared to future. And that is where the idea of linearity also comes in. And that is what we mean by historicism, because you are trying to understand freedom and rationality as being embedded in its historical context of time, right? Yeah, so let's take questions from Saloni and Jaldi.
No, sir, I just had a small doubt and it got
Yeah,
clear
please.
when you opened the slide. Actually,
Yeah.
Pratiksha said the second point of Hegel's logic to be A is not equal to not A, but that is Aristotle's logic. And Hegel's is A is equal to not A.
Right.
Yeah, so
And this is
that
the mediated unity. Okay, so you wanted, you were suggesting corrections in her observation, right?
yes, I got confused and now I
And so
got
this
clear.
is simple unity where child is aware of oneself, and it's a simple kind of self-understanding. And then one identifies oneself through negation and mediation, right? This is what we call mediation and negation, right? And finally, this later is sublated. Sublation is the term he uses. And what do we mean by sublation is Gujarati and Tamil identify themselves as not others. And that phase is moved over to higher phase, where you recognize both as Indians. But this does not do away with the fact that you are Tamilian and other person is Gujarati, or the other person is Tamilian and you are Gujarati, right? Your difference is retained, but mediation and negation leads you to a higher form of unity. And this is called sublation by Hegel, right? That's the term he uses to indicate how two different things negate themselves and find higher unity, right?
Yes, sir. And
So,
sir, on page 387,
mm,
on page 387, there's this third paragraph
mm,
where we are talking about Hegel's concept of being and becoming.
mm, mm.
I could not understand that. Could you please explain that?
Yeah, being is understood as something which is static. For example, you understand yourself in static terms, as I am just Saloni, right? Who you are. So being is very often understood as static. Becoming is seen as a process. And for Hegel, you didn't become, you are not Saloni, but you became Saloni through process of mediation and negation, right? So becoming is a process. Being is understood as static, all right? Hona.
Yes, sir. Yes.
But becoming, yani, you turn into something else. Yes, let's take questions from Jaldi and Tiksha and Digvijay. Yeah.
Right, sir. So my question is sort of a little bit related to what Saloni asked. So when he talks about the knowledge of absolute, which is the product of 200 years of philosophy and negating each other and all of that, so is this absolute that he talks about, is it the fact that, you know, is it the knowledge there that there exists one absolute, or he knows what absolute is? So which one is it? Does he know what absolute is?
Very interesting. Because you know what? He says that the idea of absolute itself is not a new idea. And he makes a distinction between concept, right, and idea. Concept of absolute as an abstract category, right, is as you find it in older philosophies. And this is where I think even Jay was interested in Indian philosophies and all that. And he says that the Indian philosophy or Oriental philosophy very often talks of Brahma and Advait. But this is all abstraction, right? It's not actual realization of absolute, concrete realization of subject as substance. That is not what happens. You just intellectually understand that what is Advait or Brahma. So that idea of absolute for Hegel is an abstract idea. But very interestingly, if you read his preface to Phenomenology of Spirit, he says that it is a realization, actual concrete realization of the absolute that happens, and it happens as a movement from beginning of his book to the end. So he refuses to summarize his book, saying that if I give summary of my book, just like what I am doing to you, absolute will be very abstract category, right? And that's where your question is coming from. Does Hegel claim that absolute is a concrete category, right? Am I right, Jaldi? Or does he say it is just an idea? He says it is something that is realized, right?
Yeah.
As concrete substance is grasped as subject. So for him, it's a real concrete situation. But we are discussing it creates an impression that it's an abstract idea in Hegel. But his claim is contrary to what we are saying.
So do we leave it be right for right now, that we just take it sort of given that he is talking in he's talking about the absolute in concrete real terms? Do we just
Yes.
take that?
We
Okay.
take it as given because that became point where people criticize his dialectic, right?
All right.
But that is his claim.
Mhm. Sir, I don't remember the exact page number, but in one of the one segment of the text, he seems to be claiming that being and nothingness are almost the same. So,
Yes.
so when it sort of exists simultaneously. So does this somehow influence the idea of the school of existentialism later?
Very much. And very good question indeed. Means Heidegger builds on this idea that being is nothing. Right? I don't know if you've heard of Heidegger. Heidegger as an existential philosopher, right? And he is agreeing with Hegel on this point. So Hegel, you can see influence of Hegel on Marx and subsequent philosophers, post-Marxists, existentialists, even deconstruction owes a lot to Hegel, right? So Hegel has been something what Plato was for ancient period. And some people have also pointed out Neoplatonic influences on Hegel.
Right. So,
Right, but very good, very important observation. Yeah, go ahead.
right. But then being, becoming, and so then absolute will be the nothingness, right? Then is
No, absolute will be the concrete realization of substance and subject as one in totality. That's his claim.
right.
Again,
So
like if you go back to this phase, then this is absolute is the next phase, outcome of something.
all right.
That's his claim. So you can take it as given, and people have critiqued him on this point, right? Just like people critique Kant on saying, how do you know that noumenon exists?
Right.
That,
So
right.
uh just one this, and now the next one is not much of a question. It's sort of a confusion that I have. The confusion in the whole the idea that we began with, the idea of subject or cogito and the object and nature. I went through the lectures, I referred the notes, the texts, but I just couldn't, like, I understood the example that was previously given, the truck approaching an individual, and the individual not having to think if this is real or not, and all of that. But I somehow cannot distinguish what was told. So would you please explain it again?
Yeah, look at this screen, right? So in Descartes, you have the distinction between nature and the cogito, or thinking substance and substance, or mind and matter, if you want to use that term, right? Mind versus matter. This distinction comes up. But actually, how is it that, and we have to go to Kant to understand what he is saying, that how do you know that sum of all angles of a triangle is 180 degrees? It is a derivation through mathematical operation in human mind, but nature conforms to it, right? Yes, no?
Yes, it does.
And that happens because of the transcendental nature, the grounds of knowing. A priori, you have to assume that there is some agreement or purposiveness, harmony between mind and the nature, right? So that is the next phase. And finally, would the question of subject come in through and absolute come in with Hegel, where substance and thinking substance, that is cogito, and the object are seen as one. Means idea of the truck and truck are not different. You cannot separate both, the idea of the truck and the truck, according to Hegel.
So
What is rational is real, what is real is rational.
Right. So is it like we discussed in Aristotelian ideas that the primary and the secondary substance, but and they
I think
cannot.
this question is cropping up again. Did you ask the question or who asked this question?
Yes, it is coming up again. No, I did not ask, but I cannot. I cannot seem to remember right now.
Actually,
it was me.
Okay.
Yeah. So the difference between Aristotle and Hegel is that Aristotle is not claiming that the idea of the pen and pen is one and the same in human mind and matter is same as in a claim kar raha hai wo. He is believing that the pen exists independently of mind. This phone exists independently of my mind. That is what Aristotle is claiming. He is claiming it as objective truth. But Hegel transcends it by saying that it's neither subjective nor objective, but both. Synthesis of subjective and objective, rationalism and empiricism. And he's saying that it's one and the same. And this is similar to Kant's transcendental idealism, which is, as we are pointed out, is different from Plato. Plato would say that this phone is an inferior derivative version of the phone. And idea of the phone is reality. This exists, but it's not reality. So he makes a distinction between two things. Idea of the phone and phone I'm holding in my hand. And that's why it's called ontological dualism. Right? And Kant is saying that idea of the phone and phone is one thing. It is ontological monism that they are pointing out. So you can see that these are the similarities in German philosophical traditions, and that's why it's called German idealism.
Right. So
you find similarities in Hegel and Kant because they are एक ही स्कूल में गए हैं सब लोग, right up to Nietzsche, Marx, Freud, Heidegger, Habermas, all these German philosophers. Yes, Digvijay, तुम्हारा question.
Yes, sir. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes. So when we were talking about these, three stages of realization, when one realizes one's identity and then he or she realizes that they are different from the other, and the third stage where you find a common ground in a higher understanding. So the example we looked at was the Tamil and the Gujarati, and coming to a common ground in the identity of the Indian. And also
Right.
we looked at other examples where we took the higher common ground to be the category of human. So my question was, if I take an example like that, I recognize myself as an other from my mother, and then uh, can I take the higher common ground to be a category like academician? So when I say that me and my mother, realize our common ground in the higher understanding of being academicians, or is it necessary to take a higher category to be uh, one which is universal in some sense, or some other sort, like the identities of the Indian or the human? Or can we take any sort of identity that sort
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
unites us?
Yes. You can
Okay.
look at any of the identity, but the question is, it is a mediated one. That means
Mm-hmm.
what is Indian has to be through Gujarati and Tamil.
Yes.
Without Gujarati and Tamil, Indian nahi ban sakega. Right?
Okay.
It's a mediated unity. So if
Mm-hmm.
academician is, suppose your mother is also an academician and you are also an academician, then both of you are converging, right? Meet through differences, right? So
Mm-hmm.
identification happens through differences.
Yes. Yes.
That is,
So what has this got to do with absolute? When we say that at the third stage of understanding, you are the absolute. So,
but
like,
that was an example I gave from his logic, but he's talking
mhm,
of self-consciousness, right?
mhm,
And he's saying that your first is when you were born, simple immediate self-consciousness was like A is equal to A. The second
mhm,
stage was through negation. You
yes,
realize that you are not the other, right? Your essence
yes,
is in negation of the other. And then the third, you realize the higher form of unity, and that can be human being. राइट एकेडमिशियन तो मैंने सिर्फ लॉजिक को ध्यान में रख के ये
mhm,
कॉन्शियसनेस की बात हो रही है राइट
yes,
व्हेन
yes,
वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट गाइस्ट फेनोमेनोलॉजी ऑफ स्पिरिट तो स्पिरिट की व्हेन वी आर डिस्कसिंग स्पिरिट then we are not talking about academician, we are talking
mhm,
about consciousness, higher form of consciousness, which comes through sublation of the second stage of contradiction. So contradiction of this is very important, and contradiction of this is also very important. So this is negated by the second stage is negated by third stage, right?
uh-huh,
We are talking about phenomenology of spirit.
yes.
So
So,
academician वाला example आएगा logic समझने के लिए.
okay. So here you are using the word absolute as in you just defined it as a realization of substance and subject as one. Is it
Self consciousness, exactly.
okay? All right.
Okay. Yes, Titiksha, your question.
So I'm talking in reference with logic only. So in logic, if you're talking about Aristotle's law of logic, the first one is A, right?
No, A is
And
not equal to not A. A is not equal to not A. ऐसे कह रहा है.
no, Aristotle's
Same as B. A is equal to B ऐसे कह नहीं सकते.
yes, sir, but in Aristotle's law of logic, the first one being the law of identity, I actually read it up again.
हाँ ये वाला.
In her,
So actually,
yeah.
I am not talking about his syllogism here. What I am talking about that this is not possible in एरिस्टोटल के A इज इक्वल टू B हो नहीं सकता।
हाँ
यहाँ
राइट
पे हो सकता है। कैसे, ये देखो, A इज इक्वल टू नॉट A, बराबर है ना? So it is हो सकता है, something like this is possible. So
one second.
my point that I'm making is not to follow it too literally here, but understand that negation is possible, not only possible but central to Hegel's dialectic.
Yeah, sir, would it be possible if you like, I am talking about Habib only, and what I'm forgetting the page. Aristotle's Logic on page 45.
But Tidiksha, you know what? It's going to be a longish affair for Hegel. So just accept
Sir,
this
I'll
for
just cut it short. It's all right. I'll just cut it short. What it says here is that his laws of logic. Hegel referred to his laws of logic, right? And he had 3 laws of logic, and the first one was A is A, right? And here, when I was reading Hegel in Habib only, on page 388, the first paragraph, 388, it says that Hegel points out that if we actually adhere to the first law of traditional logic, and I'm assuming traditional logic means Aristotle's logic,
right,
that A is A, we would be reduced to such empty tautological utterances as a planet is a planet, mind is mind. Now, this is established, right? But when we talk about Hegel's logic, the third one, again we come to A is A. So
no.
it is probably the same in denotation, but different in understanding is what I am assuming.
Yeah. And what is difference is also I will tell you.
Yes,
This
sir.
which I have written is not to be understood in formal terms. It's a formal logic, right?
Okay.
For Hegel, logic is not formal, right? It is when I don't know how to even express it. It involves grasping of subject as substance. So it involves content as well, not just form of it. So A is equal to A, planet is equal to planet are formal equations which are tautological in Hegel's view, right? But I use this to tell you about his 3 phases of dialectic. मैं dialectic समझाने के लिए ये 3 phases बोल रहा हूँ. So it looks as if formal. See, basic problem with Hegel is that his claim that he is not doing what others are doing has to be understood as a movement in his book, right? So it sounds as if absolute is a formal idea, but he claims that it's a process that you have to, so even his book is a process. So you have to begin and experience it, and then you will realize the absolute at the end as it. I don't know if I'm making any sense.
Sir, a question. Don't you think Habib is making it too simplistic in that sense then?
You cannot, okay, read Hegel.
No, sir. Thank you.
Why not?
Thank you, sir.
करो हम पढ़ेंगे, हम देखेंगे. Okay, let's see. Okay, page 386, 385, right? Hegel is talking about his dialectic. He's explaining it. So here it goes, right? Page 386. Everything turns on grasping the expressing the truth, not as substance, but equally as subject. This substance is as subject pure simple negativity, and is for this very reason the bifurcation of the simple. It is the doubling which sets up opposition, and then again the negation of this indifferent diversity and of its antithesis, the immediate simplicity. Only this self-restoring sameness or this reflection in otherness within itself, not an original or immediate unity as such, is the true. It is the process of one's becoming, the circle that presupposes its end as its goal, having its end also as its beginning, and only by being worked out to its end is its actual. Jaldi, this is in relation to your question of linearity as well. So what do you make of this paragraph? This gives you a sense of how it is difficult to grasp what Hegel is saying. I will read it again. Everything turns on grasping the and expressing the true, not as substance, but equally as subject. This substance is the substance which you have grasped as subject, is pure and simple negativity. And is for this very reason the bifurcation of the simple. Let's look at this. This is the bifurcation of the simple. This is first step of the dialectic, and finally when substance is grasped as subject, this self-restoring unity, yes, where you see the reflection of this in this. Can you see my screen here? Can you
Yes,
see my
sir.
screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah. So when you see reflection of yourself in the other and other in the higher stage of the dialectic after negation is true. So thesis, antithesis, and finally synthesis is what he is talking about. Right. So this just suggests the difficulty level of what he says. But very interesting example that he has given may help you to understand dialectic even better. He says that we might see the growth of plant as having 3 stages. Page 386, third paragraph. Bud, blossom, and fruit. If we take bud on its own, this is our first perspective, it appears to be self-identical. Bud ye kya hai? To sirf bud hai. But then blossom shows forth, bud disappears, right? And blossom in its turn gives way to fruit. So actually the essence of the bud was not contained in its immediate essence outside of itself. It referred beyond itself. Bud became something else, blossom. And this blossom is the state of negation, where the essence of the bud is seen in something which is not bud, that is the blossom, right? And then blossom leads back to an essence of the blossom extend back to bud and forward into fruit. So its essence is divided in 3 parts. But they all achieve their identity as essential elements of overall process, which is plant. The principle of totality unites these 3. So plant is this dialectic. Bud and blossom negate each other, right? And fruit negates both bud and blossom. So through this negation is this totality of plant established.
Sir, so even if we see it in this this plant context, this example that we just read, it would still be a circular process, right? Because
yes. Look at the last sentence of Hegel's own words. It is the process of its own becoming, the circle that presupposes its end as its goal, and having its end also as its beginning. And only by being worked out to its end, it is the actual. So why does it become linear is because the actual will come at the end. इसलिए मैंने linear word कहा. शुरुआत में actual नहीं होता. बाद में last में actual होता है. Totality is realized when the bud, blossoms and fruits. All three are seen as a single process of dialectic. यानी negation है is part of the totality. Totality है इसलिए negation समझ में आता है. Jay is asking, you become one with the universe. The difference between universe and you disappears, Jay. In a higher form of unity. Right now, Jay is other of the world, the universe. That is the stage of second negation. You become Jay because you negate the world. But when you sublate, both Jay and universe will be part of one actuality called the absolute, like bud, blossom, and a tree and fruit. Clear?
Yes, sir. Understood.
Okay. So let's take one more. But is the idea that, yeah, Jaldi, go ahead.
I'm so sorry, but before we move further, I have to ask this. I do not
Go
know
ahead.
if we are going to take over this question later in the text, but it just came out right now to me. So I'm just, so in this process of dialectic, where does Hegel stand with context to the God, the one, the universe?
वो बाद में ले लेंगे.
अच्छा ठीक है.
All right. Because we will be talking about his theological views as well, touching upon it briefly. Okay. So, but is the idea, apart from your doubts, is the idea that rationality is a kind of linear process of increase, right? So when human beings were living in the state of nomadic or hunter-gatherer pastoral mode of existence, the reason was at its limited, right? It was basic. And so amount of freedom that everybody had was also minimal. But as human beings progress, as they mature, to use Kant's words, right, enlightenment, the reason grew to its height, and that finds expression in political institutions as well. So the earliest forms of political institutions, according to Hegel, in his book called Philosophy of History, he says that the earliest forms were it was just everybody was free, but nobody was free, that kind of state. But then you had a kind of kings and monarchs and emperors taking over, right? That was the second stage. And the third stage was the rise of democracy after French Revolution, where parliament became an expression of human freedom. And the democratic bourgeois institution of electing your ruler is the highest pinnacle of expression of reason. So you can see reason also finds its expression in political domain. You can also find it its expression in scientific domain, right? So suppose you had these pandemics 100 years ago, then coming up with vaccines would have taken 5 years, 2 years, 3 years. But within a span of year, you can today come up with a vaccine, right? So you are less enslaved to mortality caused by pandemics compared to the earlier phase, right? Earlier, there were no fans or air conditioners, so you were enslaved by nature, right? You were at the mercy of seasons. But now with air conditioners, fans, and all those things, you can have greater freedom from nature, right? So rationality, as it grows, increases human freedom. Is that idea clear to all of you?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
that is a very important idea. Okay, let's take up a point here. Now, we discussed that self-consciousness is desire, right? Titiksha mentioned that. And by that, you mean that uh, uh, that the other, because of negation, you are in tension with the other in the second phase of dialectic. The tension is that there is this other, right, through which you define yourself. And the other also defines himself or herself through you, right, through negation. Is that much clear? Human desire, according to Hegel, is nothing but consciousness. Now, consciousness tries to turn the other into self, right? So, in some form, it wants to destroy the difference of the other. Other has to be something similar to you, but at the same time, it has to be different from you. So there is a conflict at the heart of consciousness itself. There is a contradiction and conflict at the heart of human consciousness. And to explain that conflict, he used the metaphors of master and bondsman, or master and servant, or master and slave. And this is one of the most famous examples given by Hegel, which has deeply influenced Marxist thought later on, but it's a very important example. He says that master can become master only when the other is the servant, right? And servant can become servant or bondsman only when there is master. So both their identities depend on negating the other. However, the master also wants to possess the other and make it the self. So this conflict is a kind of life and death conflict between the master and servant. And the problem arises when one human consciousness, which tries to define itself through other, tries to dominate the other. Right? There is a tendency to dominate and destroy the other. So human consciousness is by default given to domination, right? So there is a war for survival. And in this war for survival, the person who risks becomes a master. One risks one's life becomes master, and person who does not risk his life becomes the bondsman. Now, bondsman has to call his master his bondsman can become bondsman if master calls him a bondsman, and master can become master only if his servant calls him master. So master needs his servant to be a master. Otherwise, that master will not be master. Does that make any sense to you? So this conflict is played out in all human domains. Say, for example, masculine and feminine, right? The relation between, we used, say, for example, China and India, right? Now, China and India both negate themselves to identify themselves, right? They negate that we are not Indians so that we are Chinese, and we are not Chinese so that we can be Indian. But this negation, this contradiction is based on a conflict that you have to dominate the Chinese and make Chinese into Indian, or you have to Chinese have to dominate you and make you Chinese. But if you are made into Chinese, then they cannot be Chinese. That's the contradiction. Is this central contradiction clear? Contradiction of human desire. So the second stage of dialectic is a violent conflictual one. Whether he influenced Darwin, I am not sure. I don't think so, because Darwin did not read Hegel, probably. In what sense, Jaldi? In terms of survival की बात कर रहे हो?
Yes, sir. I mean, we're all acquainted with his Darwin's theory of survival of the fittest, and this sort of echoes that idea. So I just thought, and it also makes sense chronologically. I mean, Hegel preceded Darwin, so it may have been. But then again, we don't know.
It's difficult to, because Darwin, an Englishman, did not probably read German Hegel. He was a scientist and he based his theories on his own conclusions. And they are not exactly saying the same thing of survival of the fittest. What Hegel is talking about is self-consciousness, in order to be who you are, right, has to, on one hand, preserve the otherness of the other. But at the same time, there is a tendency to turn that other into self, to possess that self. So the conflict between masculine and feminine, for example, right? Masculine requires feminine to be masculine. Strange, right? But masculine also wants feminine to be like masculine. How does that sound? The feminine wants the masculine to be masculine, but at the same time wants masculine to be more like feminine. Can you see the conflict here?
Yes, sir,
Right?
but it sort of makes sense. I mean, even in practical life.
Right. So this violence and conflict is at heart of violence, conflict, and desire, and the tendency to dominate the other are part of human consciousness, according to Hegel. And that's why this dialectic is not simple, non-violent process. This sublation is not that of very calm, silent sublation. It's not, and that's why it's not exactly spiritual realization, जहाँ पे आप ध्यान करते हो जय और आप आत्मा और परमात्मा का मिलन पाते हो. It's not that kind of thing.
So it comes by observation. Like we are, like if you're talking with someone, then we have to see that which eye of ours is talking. It's not us that is talking. It's someone else. So we have to come out of the eye thing. So there is no such eye. Like I mean, when I am angry, then there's a different eye. When I am jealous, then there's a different eye.
Okay, so consider this I or your ego, as you point out, and you are different, right? Now the
Yes.
problem is that relation between you and your I becomes the one of conflict.
Yes, sir.
You try to dominate your ego, and then
No, we
ego
don't have
tries
to
to
dominate. We just have to see. We just have to observe. We can't do anything about it because we don't have
But
such power to do anything
that
about
does
it.
not happen in reality.
Okay.
How much moments can you observe yourself? What you are talking about is consciousness as different from ego, right? Or the subject. And there is, when you create a split within yourself, right? Observing self and the ego, then there is a difference. There is a kind of conflict and tension between the two parts of your own self.
Yes, sir.
And you want to separate yourself from your ego. That itself is conflictual.
So we have to make there's a term like false personality. So we have to see that what I is what I is coming from the false personality.
So who makes this term false personality? Who knows that this is false personality?
There is someone who knows that this is false personality, I think.
But is that someone you?
No, that is not me because I am totally into false personality.
So basically, it's a difficult task to separate yourself, right? You're creating a split within yourself.
Yeah. So you
Right?
have to
Between
move
the
towards
observing
personality
self.
and then there is essence. From false personality, there is a step by step method. So when we are in false personality, our aim is to move towards personality. That is
Now,
our
what
rule.
Hegel say that in theory, ये तो बहुत अच्छा लगता है सुनने में. And that is his whole problem with Oriental philosophies. That in abstraction, they sound very good. आप हिमालय पे जाओ, ध्यान करो और observe करो और आत्मा और परमात्मा का मिलन हो. But that is not what he wants. He wants a union of subject and substance in the way E is equal to mc square. Like all angles of the triangle are 180 degrees. He wants it as union in a concrete way, not as abstract concept. ये सब mental gymnastics हो जाते हैं.
So, but
And they are moving.
the realization is the same, right, sir?
नहीं, realization ऐसे हो ही नहीं सकता. Unless you, तो होता क्या है, this when this realization does not happen, according to Hegel, there is a fallout. And that fallout, he calls it unhappy consciousness. And unhappy consciousness is what we studied as Christianity, according to him, religion. It's given by some form of resignation. And he talks about stoicism. He talks about all those philosophies, if you remember, cynicism. किसको याद है वो सब philosophies, Greek philosophy में वो जो Hellenistic period की philosophies थी, stoicism, hedonism, cynicism. Does anyone remember this? Judaism, Christianity. All this is the kind of, you want to withdraw from the world, right? So what you are saying, Jai, is also about, in some sense, withdrawing from the world, right? And this withdrawal is a form of unhappy consciousness. What I am saying.
Yes, sir.
So all Eastern philosophies in Hegel, as well as the older Greek philosophies and all the philosophies which talk about detachment, about withdrawing yourself from the world. मेरा
Correct.
thinking mind बहुत बोलने वाला mind एक अलग है. मैं observer state में constantly रहूं. You're withdrawing from the world as an observer, right? Yes, no.
Yes, sir. But actually, we don't have to withdraw, because when we start to observe, then it happens automatically. Like we don't have to do something, and then we
But
tend to
ultimately,
find that what is the thing that is separating. Like
basically, you are trying to detach, right?
actually, I'm not trying. It's happening in the starting. I have to make an effort to do that, but after
but that you have to do
significant
that.
observation.
That's the paradox here. तुम कह रहे हो वो अपने आप होता है, मगर करना पड़ता है.
No, in the starting, like if you are studying something, then in the starting you have to make an effort.
करना तो पड़ता है, मेथड हो जाती है ना वो. It's not an automatic realize. वो ऐसे, you have to make some effort to stand back.
Yes, we have to make an effort, but it gradually declines. Like the effort declines.
That does not happen. Consider that does not happen. That's why nobody is able to sublate. Unhappy consciousness is the source of most of the philosophies of detachment, of resignation, of surrendering yourself to the logos. पता है stoicism में क्या कहते थे? सब ईश्वर की इच्छा है.
Yes,
right? Logos. So all those philosophies are those coming from unhappy consciousness, where the second stage of negation is unable to rise to higher unity of absolute self, right? The failure results in this.
Sir, on the other hand, Osho says that you have to be happy in life, celebrate the life. So he says that meanwhile celebrating life, you can do this thing. So there is a contradiction in this also. So in Eastern philosophy itself, many philosophers tend to say that you have to enjoy the life. You don't have to be unhappy.
See, we are not discussing positive thinking here. What Hegel would say, पता है, ये जो positive thinking की बात होती है ना, वो negative का negation होता है. यानी आप अपने अंदर के जितनी नेगेटिविटी है, उतनी ही आपके पॉजिटिव थिंकिंग की चाह बढ़ेगी. Right? So positive thinking exists as the other which you are trying to suppress. So there is a master-servant conflict between your negative self and positive self, and that is deadly, which itself is negative. Right? So खुश रहो कहने से अगर लोग खुश होते तो आज प्रॉब्लम ही क्या होता है भाई. सेलिब्रेट करो और आप सब सेलिब्रेट कर सकते, पर कोई प्रॉब्लम ही नहीं. ये तो ऐसे वर्क है, डोंट वरी, ऐसे कहने से आदमी ज्यादा वरी करता है. राइट?
Yeah, it's difficult to be happy.
आप सदा मुस्कुराते रहिए, कहना कितना आसान है. एडवाइस नेवर हेल्प्स एनीबॉडी.
Sir, there is a different kind of happiness when we see within ourselves. Then there's a permanent happiness, but it doesn't seem to come out. Like it's when we are doing meditation or we are doing something, then when we tend to see it. But then the whole day we remain unhappy because we don't come with it. We don't be with it.
What Hegel would say, जो happiness है ना, उसकी व्याख्या तभी हो सकती है जब आप अनहैप्पीनेस को जानते हो.
Yes, sir.
You recognize it as happiness because you are unhappy. A person who is trying to find happiness is an unhappy person.
Right.
If you are not unhappy, you would not search for happiness.
Yeah, exactly.
So when apple tries to be orange, what happens is it cannot become orange. Apple will get worse.
Our mind is based on contradiction.
The whole existence, according to him, is contradictory and conflictual.
Yeah.
So unhappy consciousness is a source of traditional religious philosophies. Surrender yourself to the will of God. Why? Because you cannot take control of your life. You find yourself as the unhappy consciousness. Yes. When world that you are pointing out, you don't become one with the universe. You resign to the will of the universe. This resignation sets in. Yeah, Jaldi, what's your question? What was my first reaction to the first time you studied Hegel? It was mind-boggling, and I could see how a lot of modern philosophy is derived from Hegel. That was my first reaction, that his influence cannot be overstated. What I thought others were talking about, the source of it is found in Hegel. That's my first reaction. Whether it's Derrida or whether it's Nietzsche, whether Marx, of course, is a Hegelian, right? But many philosophers are deeply influenced by Hegel. So you discover a lot of almost later modern thought flows out of Hegel. But you can see how Hegel himself is flowing out of Kant, right? His building is building on the foundation of Kant. So you can see how much time it takes to understand such seminal philosophers. And given our time constraints, I don't know if Stavan is here or not. Was saying that we should have as much as possible, but the problem is that it takes so much time. So in order to complete many of it, I will have to take a lot of extra classes. right? So I think we will need some extra classes. So when do your classes get over? All the classes in the day, for the day?
Sir, it's
Sir,
2:10.
2:30.
Yeah,
And when does it
yeah.
start?
On Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
And it
We start at
starts,
10.
okay, 2:30 on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Okay.
Yes.
All of you?
Yes, sir. 4 lectures only, that's why.
Right. So we will take extra. And how about Thursdays, Friday, Saturday?
We have the last lecture from 2:40 to 3:40.
And when do you start on Thursday, Friday, Saturday?
10, sir.
10. So I think Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we will have extra classes, maybe starting next week, not this week,
Okay.
right?
Yes.
So from 2:30 to 3:30, एक घंटा. So that we'll be able, because this required so much discussion, right? And had these questions not been asked, तो बहुत सारा confusion रह जाता. So now what
So
you can
before
do? Yeah,
before our
go ahead.
timetable got changed, Madhurita ma'am also used to take extra lectures. Now,
At what time?
so she used to take at 3. But
Okay,
now
3 to
the
4.
timetable has been changed. So now I don't know when or how will she be taking extra lectures. So
Okay, okay. Anyway, that we will decide. But I'm planning to have extra classes starting next week. उसका date time मैं बाद में बताऊंगा. But tentatively ये Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Okay, so we have overshot our time by 50 minutes. You can see most of the class went in question answer session. So it will take 2 more classes to complete at least Hegel. And we are not yet completed our first unit till now. देख सकते हो आप?
yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, so we meet tomorrow for our usual classes. You can also record this class. I have recorded it so you can listen to it later on. Right? Okay. So see you tomorrow. Have a good day.